Welcome to Free Science Fiction Stories. Today's story is Perseus Burns, where Blackstar Squadron, an elite spacefighter unit, confronts the ultimate test of their skill and courage against an alien fleet.
Perseus Burns. The ready room of the space carrier Eclipse Dawn hummed with quiet tension. The pilots of Blackstar Squadron sat in rigid rows, their flight suits zipped up to the collar, helmets resting on the table before them. The room's harsh overhead lighting flickered against steel bulkheads lined with mission displays. At the front of the room stood Colonel Vance, his uniform crisp and weariness in his eyes. He tapped the holographic projector, and Perseus Station flickered to life. A grotesque fusion of human steel and Whistler biomachinery, a twisting network of spindly, insectoid structures wrapping around the mined-out asteroids. Vance's voice was cold, clipped. Listen up. This isn't recon. This isn't a warning shot. This is a surgical strike. We take this thing out, or we're looking at a Whistler production facility capable of launching planetary-scale invasions. The display zoomed in, highlighting pulsing organic conduits feeding power to what had once been a simple asteroid mining hub. Now, it breathed, the bioluminescent veins running through its core indicating something unnatural. Alive. Hale, standing at attention, narrowed her eyes at the grotesque sight. This wasn't just an infestation, it was a hive, a shipyard, a war machine. Vance continued, "Your objective: disable the shipyard's main power core. Without it, the facility won't be able to sustain large-scale production. If we fail, the Whistlers gain the ability to churn out fleet-sized waves of those squid drones. You'll have a heavy nuclear payload on the bombers, so keep them safe. They can't be replaced." His gaze swept the squadron, reading their reactions. "We know they're adapting. We don't know how far. So expect surprises." A murmur ran through the room. Surprises meant danger. Hale had seen it before. So had Kato, the bomber commander. The Whistlers changed. They learned. Every battle against them was different from the last. Hale turned toward her team, her expression firm. "We've trained for this. We know what we're up against." Her voice was steady, but the weight of command pressed against her ribs like a vice. Blackstar Squadron was elite, but even the best had limits. Wolfe leaned back, arms crossed. "So, we punch through the outer defenses, disable this thing's heart, and get out before it wakes up?" Kato nodded toward the display. "If it has a heart." Reyes exhaled sharply. "No pressure." Hale smirked. "You'll do fine." Vance cut back in. "Briefing's over. Blackstar, you launch in 10. The room emptied in a flurry of motion. Boots against steel, harness straps clicking into place, helmets sealing shut. They were heading out into the abyss. The Nova Hawk-class fighters launched from the Eclipse Dawn's hangar in tight formation, their engines flaring blue against the void. Hale kept her breathing measured, eyes flicking between her HUD and the darkness ahead. Perseus Station loomed in the distance, a tangled mass of Whistler growths twisting around the mined asteroids, creating a web-like network of structures. Biomechanical conduits pulsed with eerie green-blue luminescence, feeding energy to growing ship hulls suspended in the void. The Whistler shipyard had sprung into life since her first encounter with it. The pace of its expansion was mind-boggling. Its rate of production was impossible to estimate. Last time she was by herself. But even with a full group of fighters and bombers, it would be a tough mission. Hale switched to squad comms. "All right, Blackstar, keep tight. Wolfe, scout the perimeter. Kato, prep for the first run. Reyes, stay on my wing." Reyes's voice crackled through comms. "Copy. Blackstar lead." Kato muttered, "It's bigger than I expected." Wolfe let out a low whistle. "No kidding. That thing's birthing an armada." Hale's sensors flared red. "Contact." A swarm of Whistler drones detached from the shipyard, accelerating toward them. "Hostiles incoming," Hale snapped. "Engage." The void erupted. Wolfe broke formation, spiraling into the swarm and unleashing cannon fire at breakneck speeds, tearing through the first wave. Debris spun away, lifeless. Kato veered left, lining up the first bombing run. His payload detonated along the station's outer structure, severing one of the Whistler energy conduits. A spray of bioluminescent fluid vented into space, hissing as it crystallized in the cold vacuum. It was a good hit and gave them a clear opening for them to get inside the asteroid cluster. Reyes trailed Hale, dodging fire from the Whistler drones. He was quick but imprecise, reacting instead of anticipating. One drone latched onto his wing. "Reyes, shake it, now!" Panic laced his voice. The thing's on me." Hale rolled her fighter, cutting across his six, firing twin autocannons straight through the drone's carapace. It shattered, its remains drifting lifelessly into the black. "Stay close, don't let them separate us." The second wave was already arriving. More drones emerged from the shipyard's twisting spires, their dark lattice-like frames reconfiguring as they adapted. Some split apart into smaller fragments, moving erratically to confuse target locks. Hale's stomach turned. "They're learning." Kato's voice cut in. "This station is producing more than just ships. This is a crazy amount of stuff to fight through." She cursed under her breath. If the station was actively manufacturing new drone types, then the mission was already spiraling out of control. The fleet wasn't prepared for this. Hale's cockpit lit up with emergency alerts. The station's energy reading spiked, signaling something new. A shift in the battle. Deep within the Whistler dock, something massive was stirring. Hale's sensors struggled to map the structure's interior, but she could see a pulsing core, deep in the heart of the construct, feeding power into a new, unknown shape. It was growing something. A cold dread settled in her chest. She hit comms. "Blackstar, we need to accelerate the strike. This isn't just about drones and fighters. There's something worse in there." Before she could finish, another red alert flared across her HUD. A third wave was incoming, and this time they weren't drones. Hale's blood ran cold as the first alien fighters detached from the shipyard, their Whistler heads twisting toward her, legs curling as they propelled forward in eerie synchronization. Their triangular lattice frames flexed unnaturally, shifting as they moved, like a predator adjusting its stance before the kill. Hale's HUD struggled to lock onto them, the shipboard AI flickering between sensor readings. These were not like the previous drones. The first energy blasts screamed across the battlefield, violent arcs of blue-green light lancing through space. The airless void muffled sound, but inside the cockpit, Hale felt it. The tremor of raw power tearing past. A direct hit would have evaporated her fighter. She rolled left, narrowly evading a blast. Reyes wasn't so lucky. A Whistler beam scored across his wing, sending his fighter spiraling. His voice crackled over comms, raw with panic. "I'm hit. I'm hit." Hale gritted her teeth. "Stay in control, Reyes. Stabilize manually." Reyes' damaged craft tumbled toward a shattered mining platform, jagged metal looming like the gaping maw of a dead titan. He fought the spin, struggling against G-forces, fingers scrambling across the controls. At the last second, his maneuvering thrusters kicked in, leveling him out just meters above the wreckage. "I'm still here," he gasped. "Then get back in formation," Hale ordered. Kato's bombers lined up for another run, but before he could launch his payload, a Whistler fighter pivoted mid-flight, defying inertia, and lunged straight at him. Hale had seconds to react. She pitched hard, engines roaring, and let her targeting computer guide her. Twin autocannons ripped through space, tearing into the Whistler ship just before it could impale Kato's craft. The enemy fighter erupted in a burst of ichor and shattered metal, its pieces spinning away into the debris field. Kato's voice came through, steady despite the close call. "Thanks, lead, returning to run." "Make it count," Hale replied. Below them, Perseus Station burned. The Whistler biomechanical structures pulsed with that sickening green-blue energy as they continued to feed power into their growing war machines. The mining asteroids had become fused together by alien sinew, stretching black tendrils between them, as if they were part of some grotesque organism. And deep within the complex, Hale's sensors detected something was growing. Massive energy readings, coming from the glowing sphere at the heart of the shipyard. Kato saw it first. A pulse of bioelectric energy rippled outward, disrupting sensor feeds, washing over the battlefield in a sickening wave of interference. The Whistler fighters shifted in response, their lattice-like frames reshaping in real time, optimizing. Kato's bombers were lined up for the final run on the shipyard's core, but the Whistler fighters moved to intercept, forming a near-impenetrable wall of shifting bodies and energy blasts. Hale's grip tightened on the controls. There was only one way through. Wolfe, Reyes, punch a hole through that line. The two interceptors didn't hesitate. They burned hard, breaking formation and diving straight into the enemy ranks, cannons blazing. "You better make this count, Kato," Wolfe growled as he twisted through incoming fire. Hale pushed her own fighter forward, dodging debris, weaving between Whistler blasts with razor-thin margins. They had seconds before the enemy regrouped. Kato and his group launched their heaviest payloads. The missiles picked up speed as they tore through space toward the target. The payloads detonated against the pulsing core of the shipyard, sending a chain reaction through the biomechanical veins spread across the asteroids. Flames erupted, shock waves tearing apart alien structures, sending Whistler debris scattering into space. Nuclear fire burned through the steroids and Whistlers alike, wiping clean a huge section of space. Then, the real horror emerged. The core's energy pulsed one final time, mortally wounded from the missile strike, but from the depths of the alien shipyard something massive stirred. A warship-sized construct, unlike anything seen before, began to pull free from the docking clamps. But it wasn't a ship. It was a living war machine. Its three immense arms began to unfold from the main body, each one ending in serrated, spear-like limbs. Its head, an elongated pyramid, tilted slowly, as if acknowledging the destruction around it. Kato whispered, "What is that?" The Whistler ship turned its attention to them. A wave of alien fighters poured from it, an unending tide responding to the new entity's command. The Blackstar Squadron tore through the wreckage, engines burning white-hot as they outmaneuvered the swarm. Wolfe and Reyes covered the retreat, cannons tearing through pursuing Whistler craft. The Whistler ship loomed over Perseus Station, its massive form continuing to unfolding like an insect emerging from a cocoon. Three immense arms stretched outward, their spiked tips crackling with blue-green energy. The glowing veins across its biomechanical body pulsed in rhythmic waves, illuminating the wreckage-strewn void. It wasn't just waking up, it was powering up. Hale didn't flinch. "If we let that thing go, it won't stop at Perseus. It'll head straight for Earth." Every fighter threw all they had at it, railgun rounds and torpedoes, streaked toward the Whistler ship. But before they could strike, it moved. In an impossible display of speed, it twisted in space, shifting its entire bulk to avoid the barrage. The munitions impacted empty void, detonating harmlessly, and then it struck back. A searing beam of energy erupted from its central core, slamming into the Eclipse Dawn's starboard side. Hull plating peeled away like paper, explosions ripped through the decks, and an entire section of the carrier was torn apart in a fireball. "We're losing containment on decks 14 through 17, someone screamed over the comms. "Emergency bulkheads aren't holding." Hale slammed the throttle forward, the Nova Hawk lurching into motion, as the Blackstar pilots followed suit. "Form up," she barked. "We're taking the fight to it." It had no blind spots, tracking them immediately, the glowing veins along its body surging brighter. A wave of Whistler fighters detached from the shipyard, descending like a swarm of locusts. Hale's targeting HUD flared red. Dozens of hostiles closing in fast. "Here they come," Wolfe snarled, twin autocannons shredding the first wave. "We are so outnumbered." "We don't need to kill them all," Hale said. "We just need to get through." Kato's bombers angled for a final attack run, dodging enemy fire. "I'm lining up for the giant score," Kato called. "I need a gap." Hale's knuckles went white on the controls. "We'll make one." She threw her fighter into a reckless spin, weaving through the incoming fire. G-forces slammed into her body, but she forced her focus on the Titan's pulsating core. Blackstar, break through. They pushed forward, cutting straight through the Whistler swarm. Tracer rounds ripped through enemy fighters, missiles detonated in bursts of superheated gas. Reyes's fighter caught a glancing hit, his armor flaring red at the impact site. Hale dove straight through the firestorm, machine cannons screaming as she cut down 2 more enemy ships. Wolfe followed, autocannons shredding another pursuer, but Reyes wasn't fast enough. A Whistler fighter rammed him mid-maneuver, claws slicing through his fuselage. His ship spiraled out of control. "I can't!" Reyes' scream cut off as his fighter erupted in a silent fireball. Hale gritted her teeth, eyes burning, but she couldn't afford to break formation. Kato was already diving toward the ship's core, bomb bay doors sliding open, dropping payload. Now! Kato's bombs hit the Whistler ship's core dead on. For a second, nothing happened. Then the Titan shuddered violently. The glowing sphere at its center flickered, the pulsing veins along its body flashing erratically. Hale's sensors went berserk. Energy fluctuations spiked off the charts. Then the core ruptured. A shockwave lanced outward, blue-green energy cascading through the shipyard. The gigantic monster reeled, its movements becoming erratic, as if in pain. Then, its biomechanical limbs began to peel away. The veins along its surface blackened, its body twisting and contorting as the energy became unstable. "It's breaking apart," Wolfe shouted. Hale didn't hesitate. "All units, fall back." They burned for distance, engines roaring as the alien ship began its death throes. Tendrils of energy lashed outward, frying any remaining Whistler fighters in the vicinity. And then, with a final, horrifying spasm, it collapsed inward. The shipyard detonated, a silent, brilliant explosion that sent chunks of debris scattering into the void. Perseus Station was gone. The Eclipse Dawn limped away from the battlefield, her hull scarred and broken. Dozens of crew were dead. Blackstar Squadron had lost Reyes. As the remaining pilots docked, there was no celebration, no cheers, just exhaustion. Hale climbed from her fighter, boots heavy against the flight deck, her vision blurred. Reyes should have made it back. The captain's voice came over comms. "Mission accomplished." But even as Hale looked out at the wreckage, at the shattered ruins of Perseus Station, she felt little relief. Something had survived. Far beyond the debris field, her HUD pinged a final reading. A single Whistler fighter vanishing into the darkness, heading toward Earth. Hale's blood turned to ice.
Enjoy this story? Subscribe to Free Science Fiction Stories for daily sci-fi adventures.